Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Welcome back to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. By special request, we're going to spend a few moments on a subject today. One of our followers who, and I'm thankful, likes our content, asked me if I would cover a subject. And I got to thinking about it, her request, the subject she wants me to cover. I've never talked about this before. I'm familiar with it. Certainly in talking with blended families, I've dealt with it, but I've never had a podcast on this subject. So here we go. The subject is when step-siblings don't get along. When you create a blended family with his and hers and the kids don't like each other. Are you in that situation? What do you do in that situation? What happens when the kids are fighting and they don't like each other and they're always coming to you as the parent and they're complaining about their step-sibling? How do you handle that? Is there a way to create harmony in the home with step-siblings? Well, I'm happy to tell you yes, but let's walk through it and maybe uncover some things you haven't thought about. All right, here we go. I want to begin this way. I want you to not forget something. I want you to remember that as parents, whether you be the biological parent or the step parent, I want you to remember that we have a calling, and it's a high calling. And the calling that we have is that it is our job to develop young men and women into good people who love the Lord, who are going to contribute to society, who are going to go out and be solid and one day have solid families themselves. But right now, they're in that position to be molded into that person. That's the calling that we have. So I want you to maybe change your your outlook, your mindset on what you're doing in raising these kids who are struggling with each other. This is the time to develop them into good people. Plus, I want you to think about this as the opportunity for teaching, as the opportunity for them to learn how to handle conflict, how to handle difficulty. I want you to think of this as an opportunity. I don't want you to think of it as that my home's just blowing up and I hate it because they don't like each other. No, that's just going to happen. That's natural. I want you to change your mindset. So much of what we do is so much better if we have a different mindset. I want you to change your mindset on this and think, all right, we have step siblings and they're struggling with each other. So that's given me an opportunity to teach some basic skills and very foundational things in their lives that's going to better them as they get older and become adults. That's the mindset I want you to have, okay? So let's change the way we look at it right at the beginning. Now, let's understand some of the dynamics here. Let's talk first of all about family structures. I don't know if you know it or not, but there have been a lot of studies done on step siblings as they relate to each other inside of a blended family. So your concern about the step siblings not getting along, I understand why you're concerned about that, but I want you to understand that it is totally natural. As a matter of fact, let me give you some of what some of these studies have said. They say that often that children from previous relationships who are combined with new siblings often almost instantly step into a role where they're feeling jealousy, they feel competition, and they feel loyalty conflicts. So, did you know that? Did you know that when you created this blended family that your children, that inside, whether they could verbalize it or not, that's what they were feeling? Jealousy, competition, loyalty conflicts. That's going on inside of them. So understand their perspective for a moment. This is a difficult time for them. According to a study, and I found this interesting, according to a study that was published in the Journal of Family Psychology, children of blended families may struggle with identity and emotional attachment. Now, do you understand what the study is saying? That because they're having some emotional and identity attachment issues, it's going to lead to some strain in the relationship with their step siblings. Now, I want to take a moment and explain what this means. When you bring in other children into the household, your child, your biological child, is going to begin to feel a little bit, they're not going to say anything, but they're going to feel like they no longer have that same position with you as their parent. That now you have to share that with someone else. They're going to feel like they've been dislodged from their position in the family. They're going to feel, and it sounds very selfish, but what kid isn't selfish? They're going to feel like they now are giving up some of the attention that they used to get. They're going to feel detached. That's the attachment issues. Detachment. They're going to feel a little detached from you. They're going to look at you, and here you are as now a step parent, and you're doing the best you can to make your stepchildren comfortable with you. And so you're friendly to them. Of course, you should be. You're talking to them and communicating to your stepchildren. You're getting to know them. You're developing a relationship, which is the most important thing you can do as a step parent. Develop a relationship with your stepchildren, and that's what you're doing. But don't be surprised that while you're doing that, that your biological child is jealous, because that's what's going to happen. That's what this study was showing. That's what your child probably is going to feel. Now, what you have to make sure you don't do is that you don't neglect your biological child because you maybe are overdoing it with your new stepchild. So in a blended family, step siblings oftentimes have conflict for that very reason. So here's what your child's thinking. Your child is thinking, all right, my mom is showing all this attention to my new step sibling. I don't like my new step sibling. They're trying just to get in. You see what's going on? So then it creates this rivalry, this competition. Now, there are ways to deal with this, but in the beginning, I want you to understand what's really going on. So that's what's happening. That's what's going on. So that's the family structure. Let's move on. So here are the challenges in a little more depth. There's some loyalty conflict. Now, let's take this from a different perspective. Here's the other thing that's happening. You get married and you have a new spouse, and your biological child now has a new step parent. And so because they have a new step parent, it's necessary for them to relate to that new step parent. But did you realize that that's often difficult for a stepchild to begin to relate to a step parent because they feel like it's a loyalty conflict with their biological parent? You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes for your child to be totally open and friendly and laugh and want to spend time with their new step parent feels disloyal to their biological parent. So they'll withhold that affection. They'll withhold that time because they don't want to be disloyal to you. Now, did that ever cross your mind that that was going on with your biological child? They're feeling disloyal if they show too much attention or happiness with their new step parent. So hopefully instantly you're thinking how you can overcome that by communicating with your child. No, I want you to do that. I want you to have a relationship with my new spouse, with your new step parent. So don't feel like it's disloyal to me. I'm asking you to have that relationship. All right. But that's what's going on. Loyalty conflicts. Here's the other thing. Different parenting styles. How many times have I seen this where you have one parent who is the pushover parent and you have the other parent who is the disciplinarian? Well, that's no different than first marriages. It's the same way. I'm way more of a disciplinarian than my wife is. My wife tends to be more of a friend where I am the father figure. So that's no different in any relationship. But what must happen is that even though you have different parenting styles, you have to be on the same page. So if you have conflict with step siblings with each other, it may be because they're seeing a conflict in parenting between you and your new spouse. So what do? You sit down with your new spouse and just talk this out. Everything comes back to communication, it seems like, doesn't it? You go to your new spouse and say, listen, they're struggling, but I think it's because they're not used to my parenting style or your parenting style. Let's make sure we're on the same page here. You have to have those discussions. And then another thing is unrealistic expectations. Don't think there's going to be instant harmony when you join a blended family together. Don't think that the step siblings are going to be instantly harmonious, because they're not. So don't have unrealistic expectations, is what I'm saying. All right, so let's talk about some strategies now. Let's talk about how we can deal with some of these things. I already said open communication. That's a big one. Create a safe place where your kids can talk to you, where your stepchildren can talk to you. Maybe that's through family meetings or whatever, but create a safe place. Here's the next thing is do some individual activities together. And I want to give you an example of one that I've done recently. So we planned a family trip. So remember, and if you're new, let me explain to you that we have me, my children, my wife, her children, and then we have one between us. So here's what we recently did. We recently had a family trip, and we went on a vacation to Florida. And we went to the beach. And when we went to the beach, we strategically laid out some of our strategies with our children and step siblings. Now, in this case, I was trying to develop even a better relationship with my stepson. Thankfully, everyone's teenagers now, but thankfully we all have a good relationship. But we still want to work on that. So here was the strategy. So you know how when you get to the beach and you set up your chairs and your umbrellas, or you have someone do it for you, and you line them all up and everybody has their chair, and you play in the ocean and you play in the sand, but then you want to get out of the sun and you come and you lay in your chair and you sleep or read or enjoy just watching, listening to the ocean. You know how you do all that kind of stuff? Here's what we did. We laid out some towels, and my wife and I put our chairs next to each other, and we put my stepson's chair right next to mine. Now, what would have been more comfortable for him, more natural for him, was to go sit next to his mother. Biological mother, right? But that's not what we did. We put my stepson next to me, so here's stepdad and stepson. We created an opportunity. We created an opportunity where we spent a lot of time sitting under those umbrellas, getting out of the sun, which then gave us the opportunity to talk and to communicate. He's getting ready to go off to college. We're talking through all of that. We're talking through his relationship with his girlfriend. We're just talking about all of that. And for some reason, the atmosphere and the setting was so conducive to having this conversation that it was probably, I'm going to say, the best conversations that we've had. Even though we've had good conversations, we've never had them this close one-on-one like we did this time. It was so refreshing and so good for both of us and made us even closer. So you have to be intentional and create these kind of scenarios. So I'm going to say to you that as you're developing step siblings, their relationships and the relationship with parents, that you need to do things together. You need to do things that are fun together. And you as parents, you're strategizing, okay? Sometimes some of the things you do with your kids is a setup. They don't know it, but it's a setup. You're setting up a situation where they're going to have to spend time with their step-parent, and they're going to have fun with their step-siblings. Now, sometimes that can be competition. I want to give you an example. Here's something else we did. I'm just giving you some personal stories, okay? Here's something else we did. We went bowling. Now, none of us are good at bowling because we never bowl, so no one can get out there and be this great bowler. We have 2 lanes, and you understand how bowling works, right? So here we have the step siblings getting up and they're bowling, and it's becoming a little bit of a competition of someone can get a strike or knock down the most pins, and it's just fun. And we laugh, and someone throws a gutter ball, and that's even more funny. And we're having all of this fun there, and the step siblings are doing things together. They're bowling together, laughing together, competition still because they like being in competition, but the atmosphere was more conducive to having fun. So you have to create these situations, and they don't know it's a setup where you're making them have fun with each other, but that's what you're doing. So that's something else I want to encourage you to do. Set up these things, and start taking them on activities that are fun and have fun together. Okay, you got that one? That's a big one. Um, let's go to the next one, and it's building individual relationships. Similar to what I said about my stepson and myself on the beach. Um, Create relationships where you can be alone, one-on-one time with each other. Everybody needs to have one-on-one time. You need to have family time as the whole blended family, but you need one-on-one time. Um, and so you can also create things for the step siblings. So here's an idea. So you ask, let's say in my case, there are two boys. We have his, hers, and ours, but she has a son. We have a son together. I have a couple of daughters, but they're out of the house. But you create scenarios where they have to do something together, make it important for the whole family. They're going to go and they're going to put together an idea for a perfect dinner. They're going to plan the menu. But you see what you're doing? You're taking step siblings and you're having them to go off and plan the perfect menu. And then you're going to have the whole family come and cook it together. You see the idea? We're creating time for the step siblings to do things together. It's going to involve the adults, but it's going to create this adhesiveness in your family. Try it. Now, here's a big one. Celebrate the differences. Celebrate the differences. Now, in a blended family, let me create the scenario. Here's a man who is very athletic, and he was in athletics his whole life. Here's a woman who was not. Now, your children tend to follow you, so she has a child who's not athletic at all. You have a child, and you've pushed that child to be an athlete, so your child is an athlete. Well, in our society, we tend to celebrate athletes more than non-athletes. That's just what happens in our society. And here you have this blended family, and you have this one child who's this outstanding athlete, and the other child is in the band. Now, what's wrong with being in the band? Nothing. We love it. What's wrong with being an athlete? Nothing. But society wants to put the athlete more on a pedestal. And if you're not careful, that's what's going to happen in your household. I'm talking about a real life scenario that we've dealt with. So what do? It's simple. You celebrate everybody. You celebrate not just the athlete. And the family that I was talking with, they thought about it, and they came to the conclusion it's way easier for us to celebrate the accomplishments of our athletic son than it was for our other child who was in the band. Many of his accomplishments, the athlete, were individual, where in the band it was more corporate, not individual. And so they found themselves celebrating one over the other. Well, what does that cause? Resentment. It causes resentment between who? Between the step siblings, because one's getting more attention than the other. So what do? You celebrate everybody equally. You have to think through this. You have to be intentional when you do this, but you're discovering something about each child. Now, I want to take this a little deeper. I talked about this in a podcast a long time ago, but let me take it a little deeper, and let me kind of wrap this up with this idea. So lean in close to me just for a moment, okay? I want you to hear this. God's made every child with their own personality, with their own bent. And let's call it a bent. God has given every child their own bent. I want you to take celebrating your children beyond an accomplishment like playing in the band or being an athlete. I want you to go deeper. Those things are great, but sometimes they can become real surface. I want you to celebrate your children for something totally different. I want you to celebrate your child for who they are personally, the bent that God has given them. Now, do you remember that passage in the Old Testament that says, raise up a child in the way they should go, when they're old, they won't depart from it? You remember that? Everybody knows that verse. But what a lot of people don't realize is that verse is saying that raise up in the child in the way that he should go. Well, what is the way he should go? She should go. What is that? Well, literally, that means raise up a child according to the bent that God has given them. That's what that verse means. God has given them a certain direction, a certain bent. You know what your job is as a parent? Discover their bent. Discover the bent that God gave them. And then the verse says, and that's how you raise them. You raise them according to the bent that God has given them. Now, that means that you're going to have to study your child deeper than maybe what you thought. But here's where it's so good for blended families. This is where my wife and I have done this so many times. We've sat down and we've talked about each of our kids and about the peculiar things that each of them have, the differences that they have, the strengths that they have. And this one has this strength and this one has this strength. And I would say to my wife, I can see in our son, her son, my stepson, I can see that he's really good in this area. Or we can talk about the son that we have together. I can see that he is such a good communicator. We talk about those bents. We discover and we talk about them and point them out. That's what a parent does. Raise up in the child in the way that he should go. The way that he should go is the way that God's been him. That's the way he should go. And you have to discover it. Now, there's some great materials out there that'll help you do that. I want to give you one. There's this, I use this with guys in my office. It's called the 5 Voices. And if you're not familiar with the 5 Voices, I think it's fantastic. I want you to Google it, look it up. It is a great approach to looking at everybody in the family and their particular voice. And some have this voice and some have that voice, and some voices aren't heard and some voices are heard. And it's how to discover their voices, which is what I'm talking about, how to discover their bent. Many of you are familiar with the 5 love languages. That's another great material. You want to learn what their love language is and learn to speak to them according to their love language. If you're not familiar with that, Google that as well and look up the 5 love languages. Great resources for you, the 5 voices and the 5 love languages. And that will help you begin to discover how your child is bent. That is an exciting avenue to take. And then when you discover those things, celebrate them. I'll give you an example. So our son that I told you, who's a great communicator, something I've done a little training with him because it's my background. And because it's his bent and he's interested in it, I've worked with him, and he's only 15 now, but I've worked with him over the last several years on how to talk, how to tell a story, how not to say or to say right. You know how people talk and they say right, you know what I'm saying, right? Drives me crazy. I hate that. That's weak communicating, okay? And sometimes vocabulary is weak in communicating, and it creates a weak story. I know that some of you are looking at me like, well, who are you? So I'm talking about training our child. Well, this is the bent that he has. He loves this. So we've worked real hard on his language and how he talks and tell a story. So here's how we celebrate that. When he is communicating, now he gets in this posture, okay? He wants to tell us something. I'll say, Tim, what's going on at school? Or how did your workout go today? Or whatever. And then he creates this posture. And it's because he's getting ready to tell a story. And inside, he doesn't know that I have this huge smile. And so he gets this posture, and he's kind of leans in a little bit. And he goes into this story mode. And he doesn't say ever. And he doesn't say right, ever. He doesn't use any of that. He uses good vocabulary, and he tells me this story. And even if it's this story about what they did lifting at the gym, the story form that he says is compelling because he's learned to communicate. And you know what we do? We celebrate that. You are such a good storyteller. I love it when you tell stories. We celebrate that, okay? And then here's our other son. Our other son, he's 4-point in his grade average. It's actually 4.2 in his grade average all the way through high school. It's gotten him an engineering scholarship. Well, he's a little more shy. He's not the communicator, but he's brilliant. He's so good. He has such an engineering mind where he can figure things out and think through things in a different way because he's got that engineering bent. Follow me? And so you know what we do? We celebrate that. you have such an ability to look at things logically, is what we'll say to him. You can be so analytical and figure things out in such a logical way. No wonder you have a 4.2. We celebrate that. Now, they have different strengths. They're not the same at all. But one's not better than the other because we celebrate them equally. Well, you know what we're doing? We're taking away the step-sibling rivalry. That's what we're doing. We're taking away reasons for them to not like each other. We're celebrating everyone equally. So it's a normal thing. Those are some tools and some ideas to help you. I think you should enjoy this path of raising your children and stepchildren. And I think you should look at it as an opportunity to help bring up young men and young women who are sound, solid, godly, love the Lord, love other people. So look at it as a great journey, not as a great burden. All right? Thanks for joining us. This is Jim Cunningham with Faith Influencer.